Lawrence, I have us both added in here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let's we got our awesome rock music turned off there. Welcome. So this is how I thought we would imagine the layout here. And then I have some slides here too. So this will be recording the whole time. Whenever we want to, we can cut things down.
Okay.
But this is now being broadcast out to 4 different places at once. And any questions that come in, we'll both be able to see them, and we can go ahead and answer those live if any questions pop up. Okay. Otherwise, I also brought over some notes, some slides that we can use.
Sweet.
To discuss.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I was going to mention that we bring that in. For that. So we can only bring in 4 links then.
8. We can go up to 8 places.
Okay, because I tried to add. I think I added the destination for workplace as well. So I'm not sure if that's.
I've never tried that. That might be a good idea. Going live on Workplace. Great call. Yeah. Let's see here. All right. So if you're watching for the first time, we're doing a podcast. There's also video involved too. So we're on video too. We've got some slides we'll share today. And each week we talk about a different commercial topic. This is called Talking Commercial. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, feel free to ask us. There's a QR code here if you want to go and there's a membership site that you can go to and ask more questions or ask us on here. I'm Dusty. I'm a commercial broker out here in Northern California. I've been doing this for 14 years now, 13 years, I think. And this is Lawrence.
Lawrence King, residential agent with eXp Realty. I'm here to ask all the questions to Dusty, the professional that knows everything. So, Dusty, thank you for joining the show again. This is, we're going to be covering everything. We're talking everything commercial today. Everything commercial, and today we're covering net fees and CAM fees.
That's right.
So net lease, basically, what the heck is it, Dusty? Tell us what it is. Residential agents that may not know what it is. What is it? What is a net lease?
Net lease. So yeah, you're going to talk about. So there's a range. There's a range from all the way from what I'd call like a gross lease, all the way up to what we're talking about today, which is net leases. Okay. And I had some notes here that we can actually add on. Let's take a look at these. Okay. And let's go over to, here we go. Here's the different types of leases you have, right? So there's a gross lease, which is the very basic. It's I'm paying you money to use a space. A lot of people think of this as like an executive suite, okay. Right? I'm not paying utilities. I'm just paying you money to use the space. Okay, I've got an extra office over here. You can use the office, just pay me X amount per month, right? So that's the very bottom. And as we go farther down, so we're going to go modified gross, net, double net, and farther down, you're going to pay more and more as a tenant. Okay, so the tenant's going to pay more and more. More of that's going to be loaded onto the tenant until we reach what's called an absolute triple net lease, which is where the tenant pays absolutely everything, all the taxes, all the insurance, all the maintenance, utility, every single thing. We do a lot of fast food buildings, and so those are on absolute triple nets. So, I'll tell my clients who are new to this, I'll say, look, if a truck runs through the middle of the building, right, some crazy accident happens, you still get paid. They pay the deductible. They make sure everything's fixed to your satisfaction, and everything goes on as planned. And in fact, in a lot of those, there's what's called rent interruption insurance. Okay. So they actually have insurance that covers the rent if their business is interrupted, like they're shut down for something like that, for a period of 6, 8, 12 months, a lot of times, right? So that's the type of leases. And then I would also mention like modified gross is typically what you find in a multifamily building. So that's where you're renting a space. Most people are familiar with that. I rent a space. I pay, like the gas and electric and my internet and stuff like that. But you're paying for all the building taxes and insurance, right?
Okay.
I might have renter's insurance, but so some of the stuff is on me, but most of that's on the landlord for multifamily.
Got it. Okay. So basically, the money shot is the absolute triple net lease, right? That's where the tenant pretty much covers everything. Even though I own the asset, they're covering it. Nothing on me to deal with, right?
Yeah. So in typical markets, as you move closer to that, your return is going to go down because the risk also goes down, right? Okay. So I'm not going to pay you as high of a return when the risk is lower.
Correct.
Okay. Just like buying like a bond market, right? So that versus a higher risk return like stock, right? That might give you a better return, but the risk is higher. So as you go closer to triple net stuff, typically those properties return less. But in this market, it is so compressed that everything's about the same, right? So I could sell, I've been for years selling multifamily in California, and we've been buying these net lease properties, and a lot of times they actually get a raise to their net income when they make that trade, which you would think that's counterintuitive because I'm spending a lot more time and money on tenants and toilets and trouble than I am on just collecting a check, a rent check from Mr. owns 40 Burger Kings out here in Michigan or something.
Right.
But they're actually getting a kind of a break even or even more when we do that.
Okay. And then basically this is the question that I would have, or any investor. Why would I choose a net lease or anything like that? Why would I choose that over multifamily? What would be the reasoning for me to go from multifamily over to net lease?
So right now, again, it's the cap rates are compressed. Your returns are compressed. It's very thin margins between the two, or all a bunch of different product types, whether it's retail or industrial, net lease properties or multifamily. So things are very compressed. So your returns are not that different, right. But your effort to run and maintain a multifamily is a lot more than it is to just collect a check from a well-vetted net lease property that has a really good guarantee. So someone who's worth $40 million, has 30 different units that they run for. I'm just using fast food for an example. Yeah. So something that's well vetted. Now, on the flip side too, I have a lot of clients who want to retire or people who maybe inherit property and they're like, my heirs have not, I built this thing over, 30 years or whatever, and I've got, however many units. My heirs don't know how to run the property the way I do. Okay. I'm tired. I want to retire. What do I do? I can't just sell them and pay all the money to Uncle Sam. How do I protect my heirs? And a lot of times the answer is let's move into a net lease type of situation. And then you get rid of all those overheads, right? So even if it's break even or maybe a little bit less, the guarantees are a lot more stable, and you don't have to run day-to-day operations or manage the manager or any of that type of stuff. So that's a big benefit to people, especially if you want to retire or if you maybe inherited something that you're not really super jazzed about running yourself.
So this is pretty much a way to convert from the multifamily over to net lease. Someone is kind of beat up from, the leasing of a multifamily and have to deal with the repairs and all the updates and all that stuff. Moving over to net lease is kind of like you relieve some of that pressure at that point, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Understood. So you kind of gave me some of the pros. What are the cons of owning net lease properties? Like I know about the pros from transitioning from multifamily over to net lease. What are some of the cons that you're
not as liquid with a lot of things, right? So you've got one or two or five, if it's a retail strip or something, 5 tenants, but you don't have as many tenants and they're on much longer leases. So you could fall behind as in, if there was big inflation like we just had, you're on fixed rents for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Okay. It's not fixed, but the increases are fixed. It's like, hey, we're going to do 2% increases every year.
Every single year.
Or we're going to do 5 to 10% increases every 5 years. Okay. And then at some point, there's a cost of living adjustment, CPI adjustment. But for the most part, you're locked in. And if inflation goes wild, you could fall behind a bit there. So that's the cons. And then also in multifamily, the pros there would be you're much more liquid, right? So everyone's on a year lease or less, and you can constantly adjust. Now you're spending a lot more time and money and effort and, managing all that and all the toilets and roofs and all that. But you do have more flexibility there to adjust the rents.
Okay. Yeah. So if I'm in a net lease and I'm in there for 10 years, that inflation that may happen year 2 or 3 me into a 10-year lease, I could be out of 7 years of price bump, right?
Yeah, if inflation goes up to like 7%, like we've seen, right? So
Right.
that we saw 7%, but my increases are at 2%
Right.
a year.
Right.
That's a problem, right? So that's going to be, there's going to be a big delta there eventually, right? So it's not going to hit you eventually right away, but that's going to be a difficulty moving forward, right?
And that question is now, let's say, hey, I'm in a 10-year lease and I'm 7 years in, I got 3 years left. We have inflation is crazy, right? But I'm used to paying for the last 7 years a 2% bump each time. But now come, 3 years later, that new lease to renegotiate the new lease. Now I'm like looking at what type of bump up am I looking at typically in that situation?
Well, you'll usually, what you mostly see with net leases is there's what's called options. So you as a tenant have the option to extend that lease.
Okay.
Usually it's 5 years at a time, and usually they're not going to give you more options than what's called your base term. So your base term is what you originally leased it for. So say I leased it for 10 years. I'm going to get 2 5-year options to extend that out to a maximum of 20, right?
Okay.
No one's going to give me 15 years when my base was 10.
Right.
Okay? So it's in my best interest. Okay. The options are in the best interest of the tenant. It's in my best interest to exercise those if the market rate rent is above what my rent would be. Okay. So I can just say, oh yeah, we'll go ahead and extend it the additional 2%, when the inflation's gone up and rent's gone up. On the flip side, if rent is lower than what I would be paying with the option, I can go back to the owner and renegotiate. Right.
Okay.
So that's options are the benefit of the tenant,
and not necessarily the owner.
Yeah. You're trading some of you're trading some of these things that are more effort with multifamily and stuff like that, and maybe self-storage type stuff for a lot more stable income with a lot less management, a lot less maintenance, a lot less troubles as far as that goes. But that's what you're risking is increased risk, not keeping up with inflation.
That's kind of some of the mistakes of the owners, right? Not keeping up with inflation. Gotcha. So what are some of the common mistakes that you see? Like, I'm new, I'm just now getting in commercial. Let's say I hit the lottery, right? Or came into some money, and I want to buy a commercial property. Let's say a 50-unit multifamily, right? 50 doors. What are some of the common mistakes you see by new buyers coming into this commercial field, opposed to like I'm used to the residential side where it's 4 units and below? What are some of the common mistakes you see with new buyers or newbies coming into the commercial field?
So there's newbie stuff, and I've got some pointers for people who own property and brokers who've brokered property.
Okay.
Newbies don't. They just kind of wing it. They just kind of go with the flow, and whatever you say, yeah, sure, that's fine. You don't get anything on paper. They don't tend to like hold people accountable, like with estoppels and stuff with the commercial side. I always recommend estoppels, and there's often times where people like they're confused. Even commercial brokers are like, why are you doing an estoppel? Because I want them to tell me exactly what they're paying.
Yeah. And I was going to stop you right there. Kind of clarify for people that don't know what an estoppel is. I mean, some people don't, have no idea what that is. So can you explain that a little bit?
An estoppel is form that you'll sign, and then the tenant will also sign, right? So you'll sign an estoppel as an owner, and the tenant will sign an estoppel, and it's really just a set of it's a list of what the lease terms are currently.
Right.
And
Okay.
if there's any special non-written down agreements, like I take the trash out every Friday, so I get $50 off my rent,
Gotcha.
and that's not in my lease, but that's what I'm expecting and that's what I'm paying, right?
Right.
So that's what an estoppel will be, is here's exactly how things are. I'm affirming in writing, yes, that's what it is. And there's no special agreements. And if there are, here's what they are. And that protects both the owner and the tenant when you do something like that, right? Because that makes sure everyone's clear. Even though there's a lease, we're reaffirming there's nothing special to the side that we're doing for rent or whatever.
And you've seen like owners make a mistake by not, or well, I should say buyers not looking at this stuff in detail on the estoppel.
Well, I think I told you the story about my business partner, Steve,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
we'll tell the story about. So Steve bought a large, somewhat large, 50, 70 unit apartment building in Oklahoma, I think it was.
For himself or for a client?
For himself with
Okay.
a couple partners. Okay. Now
Okay.
you always want to go through each unit. Okay. So they went through, they flew out, they did, we're in California. This was in like Oklahoma, I think. And they went through all the units except for three. Three of those were the management said they're day sleepers because they have a night job. We can't go in there. Okay. So they didn't go through three units, and everything looked great. They went home. And then he woke up one morning, he opened up his laptop, having his breakfast, and on his Yahoo News, there was a picture of his apartment building on fire with DEA agents in the foreground.
On the news? Like
On the news, Yahoo
drinking
News.
coffee and
His building that he just bought, right?
Oh.
And one of the buildings that those three units actually were a meth lab.
Wow.
And it exploded, and no one died. No one, I don't think anyone was seriously hurt. But so that's a mistake. Always go through every single unit.
That's a huge mistake.
And they lost all that money. They lost it. Everything was vacant within a week.
Well, I mean, that's an insurance claim, though, correct?
It is, but imagine your occupancy levels, right? So
Right.
do you have rent protection insurance as a multifamily owner? No, you usually don't. Okay.
Okay. So
you can get
normally
insurance. You can get an insurance claim possibly for something illegal in your building that you were not aware of. But what about, going from 85, 90% occupancy to 10%? What happens to your income, right? We've talked about that coverage ratio before. There's a buffer between what you owe monthly and what the net income is. What happens if that net income goes to almost zero? You're going to lose the building. You're going to lose it.
Wow. And you've seen, besides Steve, you've seen that from other clients, or?
So mistakes that I've seen from owners are, especially with retail buildings and net fees and CAM fees that we're talking about, is where they don't collect the net or CAM fees and they don't adjust them annually. Right.
Gotcha.
So I don't know if we covered actually what CAM fees or net fees are. Did we?
No, we haven't got to CAM fees. We went over net fees, but we haven't got to the CAM fees yet.
Right. So I often see people not collecting. So you've got your base rent, and then you've got the additional money that you should be collecting, whatever that is within the contract, to reimburse you for, utilities, different maintenance costs, landscaping maintenance. There's different things that within the contract, and it all depends on the contract, you should be collecting. And a lot of retail owners especially are just not collecting anything. They just said, okay, yeah, here's your rent. And then these other fees are like $100. And they don't fix it to anything. They don't calculate it properly. They just say, yeah, okay, $100 of your rent is your net fees. And you should be recalculating that every single year and settling up with the tenant every year too.
Okay. So, I mean, and so kind of explain to me, what does CAM fees stand for? What does that stand for?
Common area maintenance. Okay, let me see if I
Common
can find
area.
this. Here we go.
Area maintenance. Okay.
Common area maintenance. Okay. These are traditional. So there's CAM fees and net fees. A lot of times they're just meshed together when someone's talking about them. There's like, what's your CAM fees? What are your net fees? What are your net fees? Common area maintenance would be within your net fees. But to separate them out, CAM fees would typically be operational maintenance costs, right? This is your landscaping, your utilities, your repairs and maintenance kind of stuff, for the common areas. And that's typically where that starts, right? So that's your CAM fees.
And these fees are in addition to the triple net or double net fees, all that stuff. This is an additional fee, correct?
Right. So if you're dealing with a property where there's only one tenant, it's pretty cut and dry, what gets paid, what doesn't. If there's multi-tenants, you have to separate out, hey, I've got 2,500 square feet on a 5,000 square foot building. What are my portion of the CAM fees? What are my portion of the net fees? Okay, so there's calculations that we can go over if you like on how that works. But yeah, so CAM fees are just your maintenance costs. And within the lease, there's a specific call out within most leases on what the CAM fees are and then how that's going to be calculated and when and what they should be paying per foot usually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so basically that so those CAM fees is kind of like so if I have 30 people in the building, each person has a certain percentage that's dedicated to them. Is it based off of square footage of your unit of the place?
Yeah. So I think I can you see this where it's calculated out here?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I got you. Okay.
There's a couple things. So if you have multi-unit building,
okay,
I'm using retail as an example. Most of the time, there will be a management fee also that you can charge them to run all of these calculations. So that's just an aside. This is an example. Maybe there's $10,000 a year in CAM fees to maintain the property. You've got a 10% clause for management. And this is really just for you to oversee it. You could hire someone, but you can do it yourself. You can charge them, in this case, another $1,000 for the whole building, just so you can go through the trouble of calculating out and figuring out what per foot their fees are going to be.
Even though this is not in the original lease?
Usually this will be in the original lease. So a lot of times your owners will just not be doing any of this.
Wow.
And that's why I like my kind of niche here of retail strip buildings of 20,000 square feet or less, because a lot of those are mom and pop owners who are not collecting the correct net fees that they should. So I can either help them, I can help their tenants, lease space. I can help them sell it and then fix it and then resell it. So there's a lot of options for me specifically with this type of specialty, is because people are just not doing this correctly.
Got it. Okay. So, you will come in as providing huge value to someone that was dealing with another commercial agent that may have not even provided this knowledge up front and just.
Right. I would rather someone do it correctly. Okay. I see we got a couple comments here. Okay, no questions. People just saying we're awesome.
No, good praise. And thank you for those comments as well. But yeah, all right. So the CAM,
so a lot of people, they're just not calculating it correctly, and they could be. And I try and recommend that's part of the value I bring when I'm listing properties, is like, hey, let's correct a lot of these things before we list it, so that you can look better when you're listing it, right? Your property can look a lot more cleaner.
Got it. Okay. And then, so me coming in, let's say I own a print business, right? Me coming in when I want to lease from a triple net lease. What are some of the common mistakes for tenants in a triple net lease that's coming in, not knowing, like, hey, I'm a print broker, or I'm a printer. I don't know anything about the contract.
That's common. Yeah, you have like a sign shop that goes into these retail strips, right? So a couple of things that they don't do is they don't ask for free rent. They don't think to ask about that, because you need to take the space and make it your own, right?
Right.
Okay, and that's going to take time. So I'm going to sign a lease with you. I'm going to start paying you immediately, but I don't get to open for 3 months.
But hold on, that's only dealing with a triple net lease. How about just a gross net lease?
A gross, how do you mean?
A double is not going to ask for free rent. Am I correct? Double net lease?
Most of the time, so it depends on the product type. So you've got retail properties.
Okay.
You have industrial properties. Okay. You got multifamily.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Multifamily, I'm not going to ask you for free rent when I rent your space.
Right.
I'm not going to ask you for tenant improvement dollars for the space either. Right.
Right.
When I build out a retail space, I'm going to have to do some work, or an office space. I'm going to have to do some work, move some walls, change it around to be what I need, right? So maybe I need an IT room for my office, okay?
Huh.
So there's some things that need to happen. Now, depending on the market, the owner was willing to give some money or pay some reimbursement cost toward making it your own space, because you're improving their building after all, and then you're going to rent it out. So a lot of tenants, or oftentimes tenants, don't think that they, you can ask for money. Like, what is your, it's a typical question. What's the TI budget? What's your tenant improvement budget for this space? And they'll say, yeah, it's $10 a foot up to $50,000.
What's your TI budget?
What's your TI budget?
This is huge for people that is watching this that don't understand this stuff. Like me, that is huge right there for me to ask for that. So
what is your TI budget? And then, hey, I'm looking at the space. I'm thinking it's going to take, X amount of dollars and maybe 3 months or so to get up and running. What is the free rent that are they offering any free rent?
Okay.
They don't ask that. They don't ask about TI dollars when you should, right? These are all negotiating points. Those, your rent increases. How long is my lease? What is my rent? All of these things are different. These are levers you can pull in your direction toward your favor, or you can push the other ones toward their direction in order to get some leeway on the levers that are important to you, perhaps the rent, perhaps the TI dollars, right? I'll sign a 10-year lease, but you're going to give me more TI dollars.
Gotcha.
Okay. And
so the more years, the more TI dollars.
Yeah, all of those. So all of those are levers that you can move in your direction or the other, and you're going to have more leeway on the other levers, right? So that's kind of the analogy I give my clients is what levers are important to you. We can pull them our direction, but the harder we pull, right, the lower I want that rent to go, the more resistance I'm going to have on these other levers that are going to go in the direction of the landlord.
Right. Gotcha. Gotcha. So it's kind of like pick your poison.
Yeah. So there's a market rate for all of this. We just have to figure out what's important to you, what's important to the landlord, right? Maybe they don't care about free rent, but they really want that base rent to be super high. So, okay, we can work on that, but you're going to do a lot of TI. Maybe the base rent's going to be a lower term, shorter term, less increases, right?
Right.
So that's all part of the conversation when you're talking to an owner or talking to a tenant. Find out what they want, and you can pull and push those levers however needed to make everyone happy.
Now, in this situation, me being a tenant, am I hiring a real estate attorney and a commercial broker? Will a commercial broker deal with me just being a tenant or leasing the property? I know it's probably not that big of a deal as if you were selling it. So would commercial agents want to deal with me as a tenant or assisting me, basically?
As a tenant?
Yeah, me coming in, like helping me with the contract, reviewing and make sure I'm crossing my T's, dotting my I's, all that stuff.
With kind of the example I'm using, where it's like, you got your little, like a laundromat or a sign shop, or, someone who's got a little cafe. Oftentimes you won't even have a broker representing you on the tenant side. You can, and you should, but a lot of times the listing broker will be helping those guys. So they'll have marketed, they'll usually have gotten the call directly, and they'll kind of double end it.
Okay. And that's common. That's common in the commercial space?
What's that?
Is that common for
For these smaller properties, yeah, or smaller spaces, yeah, you're gonna typically, as a listing agent, be dealing with the tenant directly.
Got it.
Okay,
Understood.
that's not uncommon to have someone represent them, but a lot of times, because of the way it works in the marketing, and they'll just be dealing with them directly. But if you're a broker out there and you want to deal with tenants, that's plenty of money there too, right?
Man, this is a lot.
There's nothing stopping you. It's not like they're saying no, we can't pay a tenant broker. The money's there. They'll be paying almost always for a tenant space or a tenant broker.
Got it. And then, do we want to get into micro living? Do we want to talk about micro living a little bit?
Micro living. Could we talk a little bit about how to calculate CAM fees and net fees?
Let's do it. I'm here.
Because I have these slides here that kind of help calculate that. So I was talking about how owners typically don't do that correctly or at all.
Right.
A lot of times an owner will say, here's your lease, $100 of that is your net fees, the rest is your base rent.
Correct.
And that's it, right? So for the next 5 years, that's it. That really hurts your value because you're looking at your net income and what is your base rent versus what is your net fees, and then you're calculating based on the price per foot that you're getting for rent. So I had a client last year who had a retail space or a retail building, and they did that same thing. If they were to have re-signed a lease and then pulled out those two pieces, so here's your rent is the same, say it's $1,000.
Yep.
But now what we're saying is 700 of that is your base rent. So your base rent went from $1,000 to 700, and 300 of that is your net fees for this year, because here's what we paid per foot last year. Here's what you're going to pay now. What that would do when he went to sell is it would show $700 instead of $1,000 for that space, which would make the price per foot for the rent much lower, which would make it well below market, which would make the upside opportunity for someone to come in and adjust the rents, right? A lot more attractive. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I got you.
Okay. So that's one thing. To calculate these, let's use this example right here, where let's say the common area maintenance or net fees, let's use them interchangeably. Those are, mesh them together, CAM and net fees. What I'm supposed to be reimbursed was like $10,000 last year. Okay, so we look back to last year. And at the end of the year, I said, you know what? We were charging you $10,000 for the building. Turned out to be $12,000. Okay, there was more than we expected. So I'm going to go back to the tenants, and per foot, I'm going to charge for that $2,000 increase. Right? They're gonna settle up with me at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
Beginning of the year, I do my books. Say, look, we were actually at 12,000, not 10. I collected 10. 2,000 is owed. Your per square foot share is whatever for the building.
Dollar amount. Now, are you giving me as a tenant? Are you giving me that notice like 30 days in advance, 60 days in advance? Like, how's that coming through?
It'll be like a 30-day notice. Like you'll do your books, and it'll be within your lease. Usually, it's like, hey, we're gonna re-up the CAM fees or the net fees on this date. Right, here's when it's due. And on that date, you say, hey, well, here's how much we were short, or maybe you were over, and they get a credit this year. So you settle up, whether it's they owe you money or you owe them money, you'll just give them a credit going forward. But then for this year, so last year I was charging 10.
Right.
I ended up accruing 12 in fees.
Okay.
So this year I'm saying, look, guys, we're going to settle up that $2,000 difference, and we're going to, for this year, monthly, we're going to charge you for 12,000, not 10. And then again, at the end of the year, next year, we're going to settle up, see if we did good or if we were cheaper. Okay, and that's how you do. You do 1 year look back, and then that's how you set your fees per foot. And then you just divide this number by how many square feet the building is. I've got some calculations there just to
Okay.
make it clear.
So 110 is no calculation. Okay.
And if someone's watching this and they're not clear, you start doing this a couple times, and it's like riding a bike. It's very easy. Once you get a hang of it, it's a little bit confusing at first, right? So here's my example. There's a 5,000 square foot building.
Yep. 10,000 CAM fees.
And we have those 10,000 in fees, right? So we had 10,000 in fees this year. We divide that into how many square feet. That means that $10,000 is $2 a foot per year. Okay.
Gotcha.
And if you were to do monthly, it'd be 16 cents a foot a month.
Yes.
Right. So you'll often see, like with retail spaces, industrial, what's the rent per foot? And they'll say, it's $1.16. Okay. That's the base rent. There's also going to be this kind of stuff, the CAM fees and net fees that goes on top of that. So what you'll want to ask if you're asking about leasing a space is, what's the base rent? Right? When you see it on LoopNet or CoStar, it'll say, $1.15. That's just the base rent. What are the net fees? Is going to be your second question. And they're going to say it's 45 cents. It's 16 cents.
Right. Okay.
And then you just add that on.
I've seen that
actual outgo, right? So a lot of tenants will come to me and they'll say, oh yeah, it's $1.25. It's great. No, it's not. The net fees are 60 cents on top of that. So you wanted to spend $8,000 a month. You're actually going to be spending $9,000.
Got it.
So, and so I have to educate them when we do that.
Why not put that all up front? Why not? Why kind of like hide this information? Because you're going to get questioned on it.
Well, it's not hidden. So when you go on LoopNet, it's going to say $1.25 rent. Within the bullet points because they have all the bullet points there, it's going to say what the net fees are. They'll say it's 40 cents net. Okay. Now, if I were to go in there and put space for lease at $1.25 a foot, if someone's looking for a space, they see $1.25. Great. If I were to add 40 cents, 50 cents, whatever the net fees are on top of that, and instead my offering doesn't say $1.25, it says $1.60 a foot.
Okay.
I'm not going to get any calls. Okay. No one's going to call me because it's $1.60 a foot instead of $1.25. Does that make sense?
Yep. Makes perfect sense. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're not really hiding it. It's just, that's how they kind of have to market it. I just noticed we pulled up this. Bear with me.
No problem.
Didn't mean to have that banner going.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure you can go there and download the toolkit, but that's what we're talking about. Okay, so does that make sense? So you're going to add the net fees on top of the base rent. That's one of the questions you want to ask someone when you're going to talk to them. To calculate it as an owner, let's say there's two tenants, right? 5,000 square foot building, there's 2,500 square feet. They're going to pay me my base rent of whatever that is. Okay. Plus the reimbursement for these CAM fees. Now we divided the number of CAM fees into the square footage. Here's how we came out. What that's going to mean to me in the 2,500 square feet, 16 cents by my square footage. My pro rata share is $400 a month. So I'm going to pay my base rent plus $400.
Okay.
So that's every month I'm just going to pay that full amount. And that's how you calculate it. And a lot of owners are just not doing that. And your utilities go up, labor goes up, materials go up in cost every single year, and you're not collecting this.
Right. Gotcha. So I'm paying that $400 on top of the base rent until when exactly? Or that's going to change every year, correct?
Every year. So we're going to do that from January to December. And in January of next year, I'm going to look back and say, you know what? We didn't spend $10,000 last year. We spent $12,000. Okay. So you're going to take $12,000 divided by, the square footage. And then you, depending on how many square feet you have, you're going to pay me your pro rata share of catching that up. And then we're going to go toward, $12,000 for the next year.
Wow. So I know we're almost at the top of our
Yeah.
time here. This is a lot to unpack, right? If you're new in this game, I mean, obviously, experienced commercial agents, they know this stuff is probably boring to them, or some of them probably forgot. So I appreciate this information that you've given us so far, Dusty. I had a question for you. Should we do a part 2 to this thing?
I suppose we should. There's lots more to cover.
Yeah, I know we got to unpack a ton of stuff, but I mean, so we're gonna do this next week, but we're gonna do it on Thursday. So it's Talk CRE every Thursday. Where can they find us at on social media?
Anywhere at Talk CRE.
Anywhere Talk CRE.
Anywhere. Yeah, you want to go YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and anywhere. I think anywhere. We've got them all, I think.
Man, I appreciate this. Like you crammed everything in one show. I appreciate this, Dusty. As always, I'm Lawrence King, residential agent, talking commercial real estate with my co-host,
Dusty Bates, commercial broker.
All right. We'll see you next week.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. And we'll go ahead and end it right now. And then I'll circle back with you, Lawrence, here after this.
All right, man. Talk soon.